Is Ted about ready? All right. Well, I'm going to tell you all I'm excited today because we're about to elect an outstanding patriot, a man who doesn't need a crash course in the United States Constitution to the United States Senate. We're about to send somebody that I believe who has the moral authority, who has the right heart to do the right thing at the right time for the American people. And that is Ted Cruz. I am thrilled that we were so supportive of Ted Cruz, not only in the primary, but in the runoff election. And I will tell you, I promised you that Ted Cruz winning that primary runoff election would send an earthquake to Austin, Texas, and it did. I have never seen so many entrenched establishment people scrambling to try to court the grassroots in my life. A-okay with us, right? Because here's the deal, even if we didn't agree with you and the way that you led the state Senate, Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst, even if we didn't agree with you enough to promote you to Washington, D.C., we will work with you next legislative session to solve problems for the people of Texas. And so when we release our legislative priorities, if there are some issues that Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst and others can agree with us on, we will absolutely work with them on those issues that we can agree on if it's good and it's right for Texas. Because as we like to say, if Texas is strong enough to lead the way, then with God's help we can save this United States. So I'm looking for the next U.S. Senator from Texas. I'm looking for Ted Cruz. Is he in the house?
Well, thank you so very much. It is great to be back with so many dear friends. Y'all are incredible. This is a room of warriors. And we've been on a journey together. The last 2 years have been an incredible journey. When we started this Senate campaign, I was at 2% in the polls. And the margin of error was 3%. Which, Kathy, if my math is right, means technically I could have been at negative 1%. It might have been that 1% of Texans would have gone into the polls and written in, not Cruz. And we went through a $50 million primary. Most expensive primary in the entire country. Midway through, Heidi was watching all the attack ads. She turned to me and said, "Goodness gracious, I didn't realize what a rotten guy you were." We were outspent 3-1. And in any other race, I'd have been roadkill. I'd have been an armadillo by the side of the freeway. But something extraordinary happened. What happened was the men and women in this room. What happened was thousands upon thousands of Republican women, of Tea Party leaders, of business leaders, of conservative activists came together. And we went from 2% in the polls to not just winning the primary, winning by 14 points. That is an incredible testament to the grassroots of Texas. It is an incredible testament to what the men and women of Texas can do if we stand together. And I'll tell you the reason I think it happened is because this is not a typical election. This is not just another election cycle, elect some candidates, move on. Our country is in crisis. We are at the edge of a fiscal and economic cliff. And if we don't pull back, we're going to lose this country. In 1775, some 700 British Army regulars marched on the military supplies at Lexington and Concord. And the shot heard round the world was fired in defense of liberty. In 1835, the Texians in the city of Gonzales received an order from General Santa Anna. Hand over your guns and hand over the cannon that guards the city. And they responded with the immortal cry, "Come and take it." In 2010, millions of Texans, millions of Americans rose up in defense of liberty. And we retired Nancy Pelosi. And in 2012, millions of Texans, millions of Americans are standing up, and we are going to retire Harry Reid. And we're going to send Barack Obama back to Chicago. I want to convey three things to you today. Number one, liberty matters. Number two, liberty is under assault. And number three, we are winning. Liberty matters. The United States is the most extraordinary, unique nation in the history of the world. For millennia, men and women were told that our rights come from kings and queens, given to us by grace or whim to be taken away just as easily. The framers of our Constitution and our country fought a revolution. First with bayonets. And I will note, just to clarify the factual record, today there are more bayonets in the military than there were in 1960. But after that revolution, an even more important revolution was fought, and that was a revolution of ideas. The framers inverted the entire understanding of sovereignty. We formed a nation founded on principles that we held to be self-evident. That all men are created equal, and that each of us is endowed, not by the president, not by a king or queen, but by our Creator, with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And our framers crafted a constitution that was designed, as Thomas Jefferson put it, as chains to bind the mischief of government. The result has been the most extraordinary prosperity and opportunity the world has ever seen. We are a nation that allows anybody to come with nothing. Like my dad did 55 years ago, coming from Cuba with nothing but $100 in his underwear. I don't actually advise carrying money in your underwear. But to come with nothing and work to achieve anything. That's the American dream. That is our legacy, each one of us, to be judged not by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. Liberty matters. And liberty is under assault. Like never before, our liberties are threatened today. You know, a few months ago, I had the great privilege of speaking in Tampa at the Republican National Convention. I talked about our national debt. It's now larger than the gross domestic product. And I talked about our two little girls, Caroline and Kathy. Afterwards, Heidi and I went back to the hotel room. And I pulled out my iPhone. It was about 1:30 in the morning, began looking at Twitter. And Paula Poundstone, the comedian, whom I don't know, but apparently she was watching the convention that night, and she tweeted. She said, Ted Cruz just said, when his daughter was born, the national debt was $10 trillion. Now it's $16 trillion. What the heck did she do? Heidi and I laughed so hard we almost fell out of bed. But you know, that really underscores the gravity of the situation we're facing. Our daughter Caroline is 4 years old. In her short life, our national debt has grown nearly 60%. We are bankrupting this country, and it is wrong, it is fundamentally immoral to pass on to our kids and grandkids a crushing debt from which they could never hope to escape. Every generation of Americans for centuries has given to the next generations a brighter future, a greater opportunity, greater prosperity, and mark my words, we will not be the first generation of Americans to fail to do so. That's why we're here. That's why each of you, that's why your passion, your energy, that's why we are fighting. And that leads to my third and final point. We are winning. And the reason we're winning is simple. We're right. We are right, they are wrong. Our ideas work, their ideas don't work. Now, how many of y'all saw the first debate between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama? There's a technical term for what happened there. It's called opening up a can of whoop-ass. Over and over again, when the topic came up of jobs and how to create jobs, President Obama looked like a deer in headlights. Utterly confused, no idea whatsoever. All three debates, I kept expecting to see Candy Crowley running in to try to save him.
She did.
It didn't work. The president likes to say he inherited the worst economy in the history of the universe. So unfair. Everything's George W. Bush's fault. Well, when he says that, apparently the president's historical memory is a little bit lacking. Anyone in this room remember 1978, 1979? You remember double-digit unemployment? 22% interest rates? Remember gas lines around the block? Remember stagflation? That was not a compliment. And yet in 1980, a very different president came into office. Ronald Reagan came in 1980 and he implemented policies 180 degrees opposite from those of Barack Obama. Instead of jacking up taxes like Obama's done, Reagan cut taxes. Instead of exploding spending and exploding the debt, Reagan limited the growth of spending. And instead of unleashing regulators to strangle small businesses and kill jobs, Reagan restrained regulation. And the result was the most extraordinary explosion of economic productivity our nation has ever seen. The fourth year of Reagan's presidency, it's 1984, precisely corresponds to right now, the fourth year of Obama's presidency. Anyone know what GDP growth was in 1984? It was actually 7.2%. In the entire tenure Barack Obama's been in the White House, our economy has grown 1.5% a year. Obama's policies do not work. And people are hurting. 23 million people are struggling to find work because if you want to create jobs, it ain't going to be government that does it. If you want to create jobs, there's only one avenue to do that. And that is entrepreneurs and small businesses putting capital to work to meet a need. And we need to unleash small businesses and get them doing what they do best, growing the economy and creating jobs. 2/3 of all new jobs come from small businesses. And you know, President Obama likes to scare people, likes to divide us in groups and scare us, frighten us with all the terrible things that are going to happen. One of the things the president is fond of doing is telling Hispanics to be scared of Republicans. I have to admit, I see several trolls and unicorns in the room. Like trolls and unicorns, Hispanic Republicans aren't supposed to exist. Let me tell you something very interesting. There are 2.3 million Hispanics who own small businesses. There are roughly 50 million Hispanics in this entire country. If you assume 2 per household, that means 1 in 10 Hispanic households is a small business owner. And the policies of this president are killing small businesses. They are strangling small businesses. They are hurting the American people. We need to get back to our founding principles. We need to get back to limited government, to free markets. We need to get back to protecting our liberty. I want to close with giving each of you a challenge. And it's a challenge. Many of y'all have gotten to know my father very well. My dad spent a lot of time up here in Thailand. Joanne, I cannot tell you how many Republican women across Texas have said to me, Ted, we like you fine. We love your dad. But this is a challenge my father has given all over the state, which is there are 11 days to go in this election. Not 12, not 13, 11. And it's all over. In fact, I'm going to do a quick digression. We are, to use a sports analogy, on the 2-yard line. We have been marching. We started deep at our own end zone and marched the entire length of the field to the 2-yard line. We're right at the edge. I used this analogy once and I said, the other side has recruited the 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers to guard the end zone. And a fellow in the audience called out, well, that's great. They're all old men. We're at the 2-yard line. What we have been fighting for 4 years to turn this country around comes down to the next 11 days. Comes down to pushing it across the goal line in the next 11 days. The challenge I want to give to each of you is as the sun sets 11 days from now, that each of you can look in the mirror and say to yourself, self, I did everything I could. I poured my heart, my energy, my passion. I did everything I could to save this nation. I knocked on doors. I made phone calls. I got on Facebook. I got on Twitter. I got on email. I got in a car and I drove to Ohio or Virginia or Florida and knocked on doors and asked fellow Americans, please pull this country back from the brink. I gave financial resources. I supported my friendly neighborhood U.S. Senate candidate. I supported Senate candidates in battleground states all across the country. I did everything I humanly could to pull this country back. That's the challenge I want to give you, because, you know, that is our legacy. It's in our DNA as Texans and Americans to fight for liberty. And liberty has never before been so imperiled. We happy few, are rising in defense of liberty, and I will tell you, it is the singular honor of my life to stand shoulder to shoulder with each of you as we fight to preserve that shining city on a hill that is the United States of America. Thank you, and God bless you.
Ted, I understand that Pastor Cummins has a challenge for you today.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Senator Cruz. As many of you know,
I like the way you think.
positive. I'm here today, first of all, usually on a campaign trail, it's you making the pledge to us and making promises to us. As most of the people here know, we've been working, I'm part of Renewing American Leadership out of Washington, D.C. We've been working with Alliance Defending Freedom out of Scottsdale, Arizona, a great organization. And our goal is to overturn something that a Texas senator did 58 years ago. And not intentionally, but the consequences of Johnson trying to shut down two wealthy businessmen put unconstitutional restrictions of freedom of speech on pastors all across America. So I'm here, first of all, to pledge my vote, my support, my endorsement for you.
Thank you.
But I'm also here to challenge you, and I will give you my campaign pledge that as an American pastor, the day that you introduce the Cruz Amendment, that will once and for all overturn the Johnson Amendment and set America's pastors free again to uncompromisingly preach the gospel from their pulpits and restore to us our First Amendment rights, I will use my influence to pastors across America, and I will do my best to fill the lawn of the Senate swamp to hold a press conference for you and any other congressman or senator the day that you introduce that bill to the Senate. That is my campaign pledge to you.
Well, thank you, Pastor. Absolutely yes.
All right, thank you.
I look forward to standing with you. As you know, the book of Hosea says, "My people perish for a lack of knowledge." And ultimately, every pastor has an obligation higher than the obligation to Caesar. And that's the obligation to God to speak the truth, to speak biblical truths. In a political context, Edmund Burke put the principle slightly differently. He said, the only thing necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. There's a reason that our Bill of Rights begins, the First Amendment begins, even before freedom of speech, with the freedom of religion. Because we were founded by men and women fleeing religious oppression and seeking a nation where each of us could seek the face of God with all of our hearts, minds, and soul without the government getting in the way. And the idea that our federal government tries to muzzle pastors, as far as I'm concerned, the federal government has no business whatsoever.
Thank you very much. And on behalf of America's pastors, I want you to know we have your back.
Okay, Ted, we're going to watch the clock because we know you have somewhere else you need to be. We got just a few questions. We heard from various sources this morning that the President and Mrs. Clinton told the CIA 3 times to stand down and not rescue the American consulate. Isn't this treason?
It is certainly heartbreaking. You watch what has happened in Libya, and it underscores 2 things. Number 1, just how radical this administration is. And number 2, their consistent pattern of dissembling and trying to mislead the American people. When the assault started on our embassy in Libya, and we now know that there was extensive intelligence beforehand, that terrorists were targeting the embassy, were attempting violent reaction. When the assault started, it appears the administration did nothing beforehand to protect the lives of our ambassador and our Navy SEALs, the men and women who were there. And then when it was ongoing, listen, this is an administration. I ask you, in 4 years, has anyone in this room ever once heard the president utter the words, radical Islamic terrorist? No. He won't even utter those words. If he's not willing to acknowledge they exist, his administration is not going to be willing to stand up and confront them. And what did they do instead? We now know that it was clear it was an organized terrorist attack, that in fact within 2 hours, a radical terrorist group claimed credit for the murder, the assassination of a U.S. ambassador. And what did this administration do? It chose to deliberately mislead the American people, to send the UN ambassador out, to send the President of the United States out to the United Nations and give a speech. Did he stand up against radical jihadists that would murder us? No. He blamed it on some silly internet video. And he engaged in the reflexive and radical behavior that the murderous behavior of others is our fault. It's all our fault. Look, every day we're discovering new facts, and every day it gets more and more disturbing, which is why this president wants to talk about anything but what happened. In fact, this president at the last debate said he was offended that anyone would dare question him on this. As he explained, the United States, me, what a great Freudian slip. L'État, c'est moi. He is the state. The hubris of power is dangerous. And I'm convinced the American people are on to what's going on.
Ted, in recent days, we've heard that the United Nations has been called to monitor elections in several states, particularly those who are wanting greater ballot integrity and photo ID, such as Texas. How can we allow the United Nations to come here to monitor our elections even from 100 feet away? This will set precedents for 2014 or 2016. What do you think?
I think the United Nations has no business whatsoever anywhere near us. And I'm proud of my former boss and my dear friend, Attorney General Greg Abbott, for standing up to the UN. It is also indicative of the hypocrisy of the UN. Listen, why are they doing this? Because it's an opportunity to grandstand. It's an opportunity to insult and attack the United States. And the UN has the most blinkered views of the world. So, when was the last time you heard the United Nations complain about the oppressive policies in Fidel Castro's Cuba as he murders and tortures dissidents? When was the last time you heard the United Nations stand up to China's one-child policy that forces abortions on unwilling mothers? When was the last time you heard the United Nations stand up against radical Islamic terrorists that would murder those who dare disagree? And yet they want to jump on a soapbox and demagogue the freest nation on earth. No nation in the history of this world has spilled more blood or more treasure, spreading liberty, spreading democracy than the United States of America did. And the idea that they would stand and take pot shots and that this administration would willingly be complicit with it. It's indicative of just how sad and hypocritical it is. But you know what? To be honest, I'm not worried about them. You know, there's an old story about a frog and a scorpion. Frog and a scorpion are by the side of a river, and the scorpion asks the frog, please give me a ride across the river on your back. And the frog says, no, 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 if I do that, you'll sting me, and we'll drown. And the scorpion says, no, 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 I will never do that. If I did that, we'd both drown, we'd both die. Frog thinks about it for a minute and says, okay, hop on. Frog swims out to the middle of the river, and the scorpion stings him. And as they're going under the water, as they're both dying, the frog turns to the scorpion and says, why? Why did you sting me? Now we both shall die. The scorpion's response, he says, because it is my nature. It is my nature. Listen, I don't worry about it because that is the United Nations nature. They're going to stand on a soapbox and be hypocritical and throw rocks. It is our focus on standing and defending our liberty, our Constitution, and ultimately our sovereignty. And that's what I intend to do every single day in the U.S.
Ted, your staff is giving me the signal that we have to let you go, but God bless you. We've got your back. And go tell Congress. When you get there, tell the Republicans we've got to cut spending.
You better believe it. I have to say one final thing, which is in the heat of the battle of the primary. It got pretty ugly at times. In the heat of the battle of the primary, I want to take a moment to single out Joanne, and also Kathy Adams. You want to talk about two, if you will forgive me, bulldogs. And let me tell you, I pity the fool who tangles with either one of them. Y'all have a precious jewel in Joanne Fleming. And thank you for your leadership, Kathy. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your passion. I am so honored and proud to stand with each of you. God bless you.